If you've ever felt nervous before a presentation, or struggle to find the right words in a high-stakes conversation, or maybe you just want to become a much better public speaker, this episode is for you, because today my guest is none other than Matt Abrahams. He's a world expert in communications, Stanford lecturer, and host of the popular Think Fast, Talk Smart podcast. We explore how to manage anxiety, how to avoid filler words, how to stop relying on slides, how to tell persuasive stories in business, and so much more. So enjoy this masterclass in how to speak up without freaking out. Matt, what are the most common presentation mistakes?
I think the most fundamental mistake is that people don't start from the right place. People start by thinking about, here's what I want to say, rather than what does my audience need to hear. And that's fundamental. Your job as a communicator is to be in service of your audience. It's all about what they need. So the biggest mistake is people see success as just getting information out rather than thinking about how best their audience will digest it.
And it's not really about information, right? For me, information means I can send an email. If I present and get people in a room, it should be more than that, right?
Absolutely. It's the emotion you communicate, and we connect through emotion, and it's that feeling. And again, people are so absorbed in what do I need to say, rather than what is the experience the audience needs to have in terms of receiving the information and the emotion.
I mean, PowerPoint slides can be nice, but we shouldn't start there, right? We should start with the audience, not the slides. The slides to me always come last when I've really thought through the talk and ideally have an outline, have a structure I want to use.
Absolutely. So to me, slides are for your audience as well. So you have to ask yourself two questions. What's my story? Get the story down first. And then where in that story would slides help my audience? And they have to meet three criteria: simplify, amplify, or clarify. Will slides in some way simplify the information, make it accessible? Will they amplify it, or will they clarify? And if the answer is yes to any of those three, then consider having a slide. This notion that you need to have a slide for every point you make, I disagree with. When you're done with the slide, get rid of it, talk and connect with your audience. And if you need a slide, bring one back in.
Yeah, exactly. It's not yes or no, it's how you use it. And you mentioned storytelling, which I totally agree. It's very important that we're clear about the story. Yet many people in business struggle, and you obviously teach the next generation of leaders at Stanford. So how do you get them to tell good stories?
Well, I start by having people reflect, what are some of the messages that have resonated most with you? Can you recount a message from a leader that you've had, if you work with somebody in your life that has been significant? And by and large, people will come back to the stories that they remember, the stories that those people told. So I try to help people discover the power of storytelling by just reflecting on its power in their own lives. And then I ask people to tell stories. One of my favorite activities is to have people tell a story about their name. I learned this from some of my colleagues who teach improvisation. It's a wonderful improv activity. But just have people tell a story about their name. And in so doing, they realize, one, that they have the capability of telling a story, and two, they see how it can be connective and helpful. So first you have to appreciate, and then you have to do, and that's how you convince people to tell better stories.
Where should they tell these stories? Right at the start of a talk or presentation, or should they be weaved in, or should the whole thing be a story?
Yes. So I think all of the above. So I like thinking about your narrative as a story. Now, does that mean it has to be once upon a time throughout? No. But if you think about what a story does, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It brings us through change and emotion, and that's for the good. In fact, I want to come back and talk about an example of that that's counterintuitive. But you should definitely use stories throughout. Is a story the best way to start? Perhaps. There are many ways to start. Take a poll, give a startling statistic, ask a question. So stories are but one tool to initiate communication, but certainly throughout you should be using anecdotes and stories. I want to share with you, Oliver, an experience I had in writing my book. I got to interview the person who is in charge of creating Lego manuals for the company Lego bricks.
Yeah,
I have always loved Legos. In fact, behind me, I've got several Lego structures that I've built. I find it fascinating. But if you've ever built Lego, you know that their instruction manuals have no words. There are no words in the middle. And yet they think of the experience of building Lego as taking their audience through a story. They believe the building process is a story. Imagine this: you could actually have every step in building a Lego, the same number of steps with the same number of pieces. It turns out when you do that, people aren't as interested. They get bored. So what they do is they make some moves harder with more pieces, some moves less hard. They build in a story, an experience, an emotional experience as you do it. And what that does is it actually motivates people. So storytelling, you don't even need words. You can just give people an experience. And it's that the moving through the emotion, it's moving through the building crescendos, et cetera, that really add value. So I find that really interesting. In my class, I'll bring in a Lego manual and an IKEA manual, and I don't say anything, and we have a half-hour discussion about the power of communication.
Yeah, I would prefer the Lego one. I think it's much
Yeah,
more.
well, I think unfortunately people, or fortunately many people would. Those two countries are right next to each other, yet very different ways of crafting instruction manuals.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. One another advantage I see in storytelling is that we can't really forget our own story. So if we approach a presentation talk as a story, it's very easy to remember. It requires very little preparation time, and usually delivery is more lively, more passionate. Whereas what we often see is sort of, not storytelling, but fact telling, where someone presents basically lots and lots of facts, which in my view works against human biology because we can't remember all these facts, but we can easily remember a story.
Oh, absolutely. I love the idea of fact telling, right? And so human beings are wired for story. Long before we ever had the written word, the way our species communicated was through story, folklore, legend. When I tell you a story, your brainwaves and my brainwaves begin to sync up. It's called cognitive entrainment. So not only does it help you remember because you bring your true authentic self, it's something you know, but you actually invite the other person to share that experience with you in a way that we can't when we give bullet points or data or other things. So you're absolutely right.
And another thing is that we get less nervous, right? Because we don't have to think about memorizing a script. We just remember the story. And this memorizing the script, in my observation, makes people nervous because we're not actors. We haven't spent years training the skill of memorizing word by word. Plus, it takes a long time. Plus, the delivery is probably not as good as, some actors can do it. So what do you recommend to people who are nervous when they face high stakes, high profile situations, speaking in front of others?
I could say so much on this topic, Oliver. So
we literally wrote in the book on it.
Yeah, I did. Speaking up without freaking out. Let me share a few things. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. Memorizing is bad, especially around anxiety. It's counterintuitive, but when you memorize, you actually make it more likely that you will forget. It comes down to cognitive bandwidth. If part of my brain is focused on trying to say exactly what I had memorized, that only means that I have a little bit left to focus on the actual saying of it. So I am a much bigger fan of leveraging structure than a script to help us get through. The second bit of advice, never pre-apologize in front of your audience. A lot of people figure, okay, I'm nervous. I'm going to say, I'm so nervous, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm a nervous speaker. What that does, instead of getting the empathy that you want, all you're doing is priming your audience to pay attention to everything you do that confirms you're nervous. In other words, you're distracting them from your message. So we want to avoid memorizing. We want to avoid pre-apologizing. When it comes to managing anxiety, we have to take a two-pronged approach. We have to manage symptoms and sources. Symptoms are the things that we physiologically experience, and sources are the things that initiate and exacerbate our anxiety. Let me give you one example of each. Deep belly breathing is perhaps the best thing you can do to reduce your physical symptoms of anxiety, the rapid heart rate, the shaky hands, the fast speaking. If you've ever done meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, it's the deep belly breathing. And all the magic happens on the exhale. So you want to make sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale. And you only have to do that 2 or 3 times, and it can help a lot. That's dealing with symptoms. Sources are the things that initiate and exacerbate. We've already talked about this desire to do it right, that perfection. That's why we memorize. That gets in the way. So if you attack both symptoms and sources, you can actually help yourself feel more comfortable and confident.
Interesting. And I love the idea of hardware before software. You need to calm your body before, you reframe it in your mind. Like, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. I was looking into the research on imposter syndrome recently. I thought that was quite fascinating and what it correlates with, because you may think that it correlates with, let's say, junior people or maybe more women. And in fact, it goes across demographics. So demographics aren't a good predictor of imposter syndrome. What is, however, is perfectionism, right? And the hypothesis is that by having this unattainable goal of being perfect, which none of us can reach,
Right.
you're actually setting yourself up for failure, and then you feel like an imposter.
Absolutely. Yes. So I often say it's about connection, not perfection.
Yeah.
There is no right way to speak. There are better ways and worse ways, but there is no one right way.
And when let's say you're already presenting and your voice is shaking, let's say, or you have other visible signs that you're nervous, how should I deal with that?
Yes. So there are lots of things you can do to help you manage the symptoms. Deep breathing does one. If you have a shaky voice, deep breathing actually helps a lot. When we get nervous, we breathe shallow, and that means we're pushing less air out, and that makes our voice quiver. It raises our voice. When we're breathing shallow, we're typically breathing more quickly, so we speak more quickly. So that deep belly breath will help. If you get shaky physically, you want to use movement purposely. Adrenaline is what's motivating that shakiness. It wants to move you from threat to safety. So move purposely. If you're standing in front of a room, take a big step forward, gesture broadly. If you're sitting at a table, lean in virtually. I don't know if you noticed, but when you first asked me the first question, I came forward. That's a way of me moving to have that adrenaline dissipate. If you sweat, blush, and perspire, which is what happens to me when I get nervous, holding something cold in the palms of your hand will cool your body down. The reason you're sweating and blushing is because your heart's beating faster, your body's tensing up, you're getting hotter. So holding something cold in the palm of your hand cools you down. Just like on a cold morning, when you hold a warm cup of coffee, it warms you up. We're just doing it in reverse. So there's some things we can do to counteract the natural physical symptoms that we have when we communicate.
Yeah, interesting. Do you still get nervous from time to time on big occasions?
Absolutely. In fact, if I didn't, it wouldn't mean that I care. It would mean I didn't care. I actually look forward to some of the anxiety, but I have worked over these many, many years to learn how to manage it. So there's some things I help manage my anxiety. The thing that will spike my anxiety the most is I will, every year I go to a conference of professors of communication who do what I do. Sometimes I'm invited to speak. And when I'm up in front of my peers, I can get very nervous, but I'll do things like deep breathing, holding something cold. The other thing I do that sounds silly, but really works for many people, including myself, is I will speak a tongue twister out loud. Not only does it help me get present oriented, because you can't say a tongue twister right without being in the present moment, but it warms up my voice. I don't know if in your practice, but I have found this in my coaching and my teaching. People don't warm up. They get so inside themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And then they think they can go from silence to brilliance without warming up. You know, if you're an athlete, if you're a musician, you know you need to warm up. So saying a tongue twister also helps me calm down.
Yeah, I have some of these voice exercises I use, or even just singing on the way if you're driving.
Nobody wants to hear me sing, but yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there are these set pieces, right? The talks, the presentations and speeches. And then there are, of course, conversations, which we have much less control over because they can happen any second in the office, at work, in life, right? They're spice of life. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's hard to prepare for them.
Yes. Conversation is how we do most of our interactions. And it's important for us to think through ways to make for better conversations. One of the things that was profoundly insightful for me, I got to interview Allison Wood Brooks. Allison is a friend. She teaches at HBS. I know you know Allison as well. And when she was on my podcast, Think Fast, Talk Smart, we talked about conversation. One of the things that she said that really stuck with me is conversations are nothing more than turns we take. And there are two primary different types of turns. There are supporting turns and switching turns. A supporting turn is where you say something and I encourage you to say more. So you might say, hey, Matt, I just got back from Barcelona. And I could say, oh, tell me, did you try some paella there? I am asking you to continue. I'm supporting what you said.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you were to say, hey, Matt, I just got back from Barcelona. And I said, oh, really? I just went to London. That's a switching turn. And the goal in any good conversation is to have a nice mix of both, perhaps slightly more over-index on supporting than switching. Because when you do that, the conversation sounds mutual. The level of disclosure and revelation tends to be the same. So when I coach and when I have my own conversations, I try to think about how much am I supporting what the person says? How much am I switching? And that can really make a conversation more dynamic and more enjoyable.
Right. Because maybe after a while we've exhausted the topic, we want to move on, we're ready for the next topic to keep it interesting. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all. And what about listening? I think, many people, me and myself included, maybe struggle a little bit with listening. We like to talk, but listening can be a bit challenging, especially since we may be already thinking about the next question or the next topic. How do you advise people to deal with that?
Yes. So my wife always gets upset with me when I try to teach listening skills. She thinks I might be a fraud. We can all get a little better at our listening. So first, we have to realize the importance of listening in communication. And it's critical. It's critical, especially in conversational, spontaneous communication. I have to best understand what you are trying to say or what you're asking of me to respond. So listening is really important. When I teach listening skills, I first want people to realize that when we listen most naturally, we listen just for the top line, the top level of what somebody's saying. We really need to listen to the bottom line. What's the crux of what they're saying? So I teach people to listen as if they are paraphrasing. To me, paraphrasing is distilling down what somebody says to its core essence. So when you are practicing and developing listening skills, listen for what is the bottom line of what somebody is saying. And if you actually not just listen that way, but then share what you are paraphrasing, you do two types of validation. You validate you heard it correctly. So the person knows you're listening to what the content. And plus you're demonstrating I care because I want to make sure that I understood it. So you're also validating the person. You validate the message and the person when you paraphrase, which leads to closer, more intimate, connected relationships. So not only does it help you listen better, it helps you connect better to the people you're listening to. So listen to paraphrase. What's the bottom line, not the top line?
Right, because each conversation has that information aspect, but usually the relational aspect is actually more interesting, more important, right? But we sometimes miss that when we just listen to the information, but not, as you said, what's beneath the layer of information, what's actually behind this message.
Right, absolutely. When you listen to paraphrase, you listen not just to what is said, how it is said, the emotion behind it. It causes you to focus in a deeper, more important way.
Are you sick and tired of spending 8 hours preparing for a 1-hour presentation? You're not alone. That's why I created my tactical guide, 50 presentation hacks. It's for free. Grab it in the show notes. One place where we have a lot of conversations is obviously the workplace. And people often ask me, I want to get more recognition at work for the work I'm doing. I want to be seen more. It's quite hard to be recognized by the right people in charge, etc. So how can people inside of organizations use conversations or presentations to enhance their standing?
That's a great question. And many people want to make sure that their work is respected and that they get the accolades or the recognition that they're due. So I think, again, it comes back to this notion of knowing your audience, helping your audience understand how what you are doing is relevant and important to them. So rather than just saying, here are all the things I've done, think about, here are how these things add value to you, to the organization, etc. We often make assumptions that people can connect the dots. If I show you what I've done, you'll see how that's important and relevant. And I have found in all my years of doing this that what becomes really important is connecting those dots for people. When I was in college and university, I had a professor, a psychology professor, who said something that stuck with me for all these years. And essentially he said, the funny thing about common sense is it's not that common. We tend to make these assumptions that people will connect these dots. So I think one way to help yourself stand out is to help make sure people see what you're doing and how it's relevant to them. Now, I make a distinction between two types of credibility, because part of what we're talking about is you want to show your value, your credibility, and your worth. And there's what I call career and college credibility, where you just list and itemize. And that's often less interesting and less impactful. And then I talk about what I call Costco credibility. If you've ever been to Costco, the big shopping venue where they've got everything in extra large sizes, they'll always give you samples of things, samples of food to try. Why do they do that? So you try it, you experience it, and then you buy it. When we talk about the work we do, don't tell people about it. Show them the value. Don't just say, I closed this deal this fast and did that. Talk about the value of that deal for the company, what it does to advance. When you do that, then people see your work as more valuable and are more likely to assert and ascribe certain behaviors and good things for you in the future.
Yeah, that's great. Costco. I love that.
Costco versus career. Yes.
Career versus Costco. I love that. And I love it to show, don't just tell, right? Show
Right.
people or give them a taste of it is also right. To me, there's obviously as you just described, the communications dimension of being seen and heard at work. But often before that, I noticed there's a psychological component where people may be a bit hesitant to talk about their work. And I always say, doing good work, yes, that's important, but you also need to tell that story, right? So how can people maybe build up the confidence to go out and talk to the superiors in the hierarchy and say, hey, please sample what I've created. It actually adds a lot of value.
So really thinking about what's important for the executive or those that they're talking to matters first, and then connecting to that. So if you know your executive is really concerned about a potential competitor in the market space and you have some activity that you've done that will help, start by connecting to that concern. So rather than coming in and say, I built this new tool that's going to help, come in and say, I appreciate and realize or heard you speaking recently about where we need to be in the future in this space. Here's something I've been working on. So connect and bridge based on the need that you see them having, rather than starting with, here are all the things I've done. And that can be really helpful, one, in making the connection for the person, and two, for getting their focus.
You have to. No one's going to do it for you, right? You have to toot your own horn from time to time in an appropriate way.
Yes.
Also, you have to talk about AI because that's the big development we've all seen happening to communications or in communications. How do you use AI for your own personal communications or at work?
So AI is something that we in academics are trying to really figure out. I very much try to leverage AI as a co-instructor, something that can help my students. So I'll start there and then I'll talk about how I use it myself. 2 examples of how I'm using AI in my class. We do a lot of work on spontaneous speaking, preparing the students to speak in the moment. So we'll actually have them work with AI to help prepare them. So they might have to give a persuasive presentation in our class. And then what they do is, in preparation, they'll go to the AI tool, say, giving a speech on this to Stanford MBA students, give me 3 questions that they might ask. And as each question comes up, they practice answering it. So it's a practice, a tool of practice. The other thing I have them do is, as they craft their outlines, their narratives, I will ask them to adjust it on different dimensions and have AI help. So go to the LLM and say, how could I make this more engaging? Or how could I make this more concise? The output of the LLM, I have them compare to what they created. And I say, okay, now look and see what happened. Not to say that the LLM is right, that the AI output is correct, but notice what it did. What is it doing? Oh, it's adding more questions, or it's adding more analogies, or it truncated this story. And that gets you thinking about the different variables and levers that you can pull and adjust to help your content be better. So in my classroom, I'm really trying to leverage AI as a fellow teacher for my students. Now, in my own life, I use AI to help me look at different variations and approaches to things. So I am a much better editor than I am initiator when it comes to writing. So I will use AI as a tool to help me craft something, and then I will do a lot of edits from it. So I find AI is a very useful tool, but it is not a replacement for the crafting of messages, but a tool for helping you hone those messages.
Yeah, I agree. And the way I look at this is 10-80-10. So we should prompt it properly. We should come up with the idea, have some thoughts around it, maybe even a structure we suggest. Let it do some heavy lifting if that's appropriate for the context. And obviously go back in and do quality control, fact checking, style checking, and a personal story. Coming back to your previous point, right? Because there's a difference between a generic ChatGPT text and something only you could have written. And I think a personal story indicates that for the reader as well, or the listener, that, hey, this is really Matt's story. It's not just something, ChatGPT knew about you.
100%. And I love how you're using it. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. In a lot of companies, obviously, they're looking at how to introduce AI tools successfully and help people. Yet what we've seen from the initial studies that are already out there, that there is even the risk that there's negative ROI. So actually cost productivity, it costs money because people either don't use it, they maybe don't engage with it because they're worried they lose their jobs, or they use it the wrong way and create AI slop, which obviously just means other people have to read stuff that shouldn't exist in the first place. So people waste time. How do you advise companies at a structural organizational level to use and implement AI and take people with them on this journey?
I love that you're asking this question. I'm actually engaged right now with a professional basketball team here in the United States to create a case that we'll use in my strategic communication class. And I think this one particular organization has done an amazing job of it. And again, I repeat myself a lot. They started with the pain points of their staff. So rather than coming in and saying, here's how AI works and here's what you do, they actually convene meetings. A colleague of mine, Jeremy Utley, who comes out of the design school at Stanford, actually helped them do this, and it introduced me to this whole process. They convened people together, and they had them just articulate what are some of the biggest challenges you have in your life. What are the concern? What are the things that are hardest for you to do? And then they partnered these people up with developers who knew how to develop AI bots and other things, and they began co-creating applications and tools that these people could use to manage the challenging situations. And as soon as people saw that AI could help, they then became much more willing to embrace it and much less concerned about it taking their jobs and other things because they saw how it could partner with them. So much like crafting a narrative or much like trying to persuade a boss or somebody, start with what's the pain point and then build the tool from there. And they did a phenomenal job. They were able to implement this across their organization to great success because of the way they approached it and started.
Why is a sports team a good case study?
Well, if you think about it, sports teams they've got the folks who are on the court, in this case, basketball, but there's a whole business operation behind the scenes that makes it work. And that business operation reflects every company. The things they have to do are exactly the same thing. And if you think about it, sports teams have as their primary goal customer service. They need to make sure that their customers, their fans, really feel supported and get the product that they're looking for. So I think they make a great example for most organizations in that they really are on the spot to do well by their customers, because if they don't, people don't watch.
And the results are immediate and obvious, right? That's another
And the other thing that I think is really fascinating is they have the opportunity to run lots of tests because they have lots of events that they do. Some companies, it takes a long time to test things out, but every night during a week when basketball is in season, you might have 3-4 games happening a week. So you've got lots of opportunities to test things out.
Yeah, amazing. And what should we avoid when it comes to using AI for communications? What's the biggest mistake?
I think there are a couple of mistakes. I think the biggest thing is just taking it for face value, right? Saying that this is the right or best way to do it. We can be lazy. We can see it. I see this in some of my students where they just rely quickly on it. We need to continue to critically think, and this is essentially just a tool. One of my colleagues, her analogy for AI is it's like an intern, right? Interns can do great work, but you better check the work just in case. And so I encourage everybody to use it as a tool to help, but it's not the definitive be all answer of everything.
An intern with a PhD and everything is that we have for $20 a month. Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, you've been studying communications for a few decades, like myself.
Did you just say I'm old?
No, I lied it, but those were your words.
Yeah.
Experienced is the term I would use.
Yes, I'll take wise. Thank you.
Right. Your wisdom combined with the raw intelligence of AI. Amazing. How has your own communications changed over the years as you have learned more and more about communications? And I assume you're driven by curiosity about communication.
Yes, absolutely.
I assume you're applying, you drink your own advice as well.
Well, I try. But like you, I mean, I'm incredibly curious about communication. I'm incredibly passionate, much like you are. And my communication, I have really tried to be more other focused and collaborative in the communication, engaging in the communication. When I was younger, it was more about the art and sophistication of how to, I still enjoy the puzzle of message creation. I really like that. But that can be a very self-absorbing thing. And I try to be much more other focused. I think if you were to watch me teach, you would see this as it's very participative, engaging, not just broadcasting. And I try to do that in my interpersonal communication as well, because I think that's where the real juice is. That's where the real excitement is in that moment. And I've really tried to open up myself and my communication to allow for those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with that. And also for me, it's combining it with AI, combining it with evolutionary psychology,
Yes.
or, different fields, and connecting and seeing, okay, this is how it's all interlinked. And this is how maybe communications can take things to, move people to positive action, let's say, whether that's in politics, in the business, personal relationships. It's so multifaceted. So never boring day.
Not at all. Always fascinating.
Matt, it's always great to talk to you. I appreciate all the work you're doing. Where can people find out more about you, the book, the podcast, etc.?
Well, first, I appreciate all that you're doing. You are helping so many people, and thank you.
Thank you.
So best ways to learn and connect, Think Fast, Talk Smart is the name of the podcast. Going to fastersmarter.io. Oh, nice book there. I like it very much. Thank you.
Yes.
Fastersmarter.io to find lots of resources, and check me out on LinkedIn. I do a lot of work there, as I know you do as well. I learn a lot from your posts. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the good work that you do.
Thank you, Matt. And final question, what's your best piece of communications advice?
I have lots of different things. I'll share my mother's advice. I'll pass on her advice. Tell the time, don't build the clock. Many of us say much more than we need to. Just get to the bottom line. In the U.S. military, they talk about bottom line up front, bluff. Be concise and clear. If people want more information, they'll ask.
So true. Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Speak Like a CEO channel. It means the world to me, and it helps us keep bringing you world-class insights and guests.